What's up, everybody, and welcome to We've Got Issues. It is our regular public chat from our private friends chat, text chat chain that we engage with every week. We always like to see what comes up amongst our group of friends, of which we are three of a group of more than a dozen, I guess, people who have known each other for more than 40 years. We have lots of interesting viewpoints on lots of different issues, and sometimes we like to pull those issues out, put them in front of you guys, because we feel like everybody's probably talking about things in their personal life that they would like to get feedback on and see if other people feel the same way. So that's what we're doing here today. That's what we do every time. And of course, my name is Nick Cates. I'm one of this posse of friends, as we call ourselves. And I'm here with my two very astute, very accomplished, very handsome, and very sophisticated friends, Ron Evans.
Hey.
And of course, Darren Gray.
Hey, what up?
So these two guys, I met both these guys at USC way back. Darren still works in the academic area at USC, yes?
And, yes, I do.
Yes, he's a computer scientist by trade. Ron Evans is a business, he studied business and philanthropy and horticulture. No, Ron has a business degree from USC. And now works in the technology field as well, back east in Northern Virginia. And so, Ron, I'm going to leave the floor to you to tell us about what you pulled out of the text chain this week that you want to bring for the people.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to go in a different direction. We've always talked deeply about politics, finance, AI, and one of the feedbacks that I received when I used AI, and I'll show you in my my rave, was that we really don't talk about ourselves, and people don't really know much about each of us. So I took that as good food for thought, and I have a question for each of us to consider. And the question is, and my theme for the show is, your personal revolution will not be televised. And the prompt is, what was a pivotal moment in your life at any age that you wish were televised, and what life lesson did you learn from it? Okay. So I think we're going to find a little bit more about ourselves. Maybe in some cases, we're going to find out that we didn't know this about each other. And I think that one of the challenges, and I've heard this from a friend, a female friend in LA just yesterday, is that guys don't talk about deep subjects with each other. They don't know about what their wives are doing. They just talk about sports. They just talk about, it's like, well, we're just guys, we just talk. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper. So in answer to the question, what was a pivotal moment in my life? It was a two-parter. I did not finish school on time. I was first
college, you mean?
College? Oh, yeah, college. Elementary school.
Be specific.
Yeah, fifth year, third grader.
Yeah, fifth grade was hard for me, man. That number line was really hit or miss. So I didn't finish college on time. And I got a job in downtown LA, and it bothered me every day. And I remember getting into running, and I decided to run, God, I'm old, the 1990 LA Marathon. And I ran the marathon, and I was feeling really good after mile 13. And by mile 18, I hit that wall that everyone talks about. And I just wanted to go home. And for those that don't know, a marathon is 26.2 miles. At mile 18, I wanted to go home. And I had the most violent argument in my head in my entire life. Sure, you want to quit. You're a quitter. All you do is quit. You never finish what you start. You didn't finish college. You want to quit this. You don't want to finish this. all you do is quit. And I just kept walking and running. And when I got to mile 26 and I could see the finish line, I started jogging. And I sprinted through the finish line. And I realized after the race, it was always in my mind that I couldn't do something. And I did it. And I also went on to think, I could also go back and finish my degree. And I went back to SC while I was working in downtown LA at a big six accounting firm, working during the day, going to school at night, taking classes. And it was December of 1994 or 95. I put down the pencil after I finished my last exam. And the bookstore had been calling me. They told me that my class ring was there. And I said, nah, I'll get it. So when I finished my last exam, I went into the bookstore and I put on my class ring and I walked to the car. And it still gets to me. It still gets to me. It was, other than the birth of our daughters and my getting married, it is the proudest moment of my life. And I wish that story had been televised, because I learned to finish what you start and how powerful your mind is and never, ever give up. So that's it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
Deep stuff. So that girl who said that lady said men don't talk about deep things. I hope you're listening.
I hope you're listening.
Ron's peeling back the onion. I've got a little tear in my eye.
Yeah.
Darren, do you have anything to say about that? Oh, well, actually, I have one comment about that.
Yeah.
I have one comment about that, running the marathon. So 10 years later, I ran the LA Marathon in 2000. And that wall that you discussed, I probably hit like around mile 10, whatever. But that feeling at the end, if you make it all the way through, like that last half mile or so, and suddenly feel like, because it was a rainy day, it was cold, it was like my body was just like whatever, and you sprint through that final half mile and you feel on top of the world. I really completely resonate with that, man. That kind of accomplishment in life really can propel you, particularly if it's something that you don't do all the time. It's not like you don't fancy yourself necessarily a runner or whatever. You did it for the challenge, and you realize that a challenge can propel you forward to newer challenges. So that was great. That was great. Darren, what you got, man?
Well, when Ron posted that, I spent hours trying to figure out what that moment would be, and I couldn't really think of anything. So I put that in the chat, and the Ron being Ron jumped all over me like, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. And so I was like, why don't I celebrate stuff? And I started searching and Googling and figuring it out, and everything was telling me it's because I didn't feel worthy and blah, blah, blah. That didn't resonate with me. And then I remember this guy, number 20 from Detroit, Barry Sanders. Whenever he would score a touchdown, he would toss the ball to the ref and go back to the sideline, because it was just what I was supposed to do. And that's always been my mindset. So when I think about my accomplishments, the things that I have done, whether I struggled or not, I never doubted that I would be able to do it. I knew there were obstacles. I knew I had my own flaws. It was just always, that's what I'm supposed to do. One of the, I hated Tom Brady for a long time, but one thing that he used to always talk about when people would ask him, what's your favorite ring? He'd say the next one. And, that's sort of what my mantra has always been is, toss the ball to the ref, get back to the sideline, get ready for the next play. So I really can't think of anything that I would celebrate, like something like that. Although I did share a couple of pictures of my dance troupe days with the fellas. but it's one of those things where it's just not something that I even ever thought of. I tried to figure out, what the theory was behind that, but there wasn't one. It's just how I've always been wired, was toss the ball to the ref, go back and get ready for the next play.
Yeah, I'm going to call BS on that. And I will say publicly what I put in chat. Your brother from now, did you grow up in a very fancy neighborhood in Detroit? Or
no, there was no fanciness about my
Okay, so all right. So let me make sure I got your story arc correctly. You grew up in less than prosperous neighborhood in Detroit.
Yep.
Came out to the University of Southern California, private school in Los Angeles, where you matriculated with not one, not two, but 3 engineering degrees.
Oh, one was math, 2 engineering, 1 math.
Yeah, math. Okay.
Right. Math doesn't count. Nobody.
Yeah, math doesn't count. I mean, doesn't everyone take differential equations? Come on. And then you went on to, work in aerospace, and you had a career that anyone would be envious of, but yet and still, you can't stop and think about a moment in your life, like when you graduated with 3 degrees. How many doubters did you have in your life where they're like, nah, you ain't never going to be able to do this?
Well, but see, that's the thing. It's always been that way for me. There've always been the doubters. There's always going to like the politics for a moment when, President Trump won in 2016, and everybody was calling, and people were like, I said this in the chat, I'm like, well, how do you feel? Like, I feel like it's Wednesday. My life has always been this way. I've always had the doubters. I've always had to work harder. I've always had, this is just how it's always been. I don't know any other way. And it's always been score your touchdown, give the ball to the ref, go back to the sideline, wait for the next play. I never, the only time I would celebrate a success was a strategic way, like, I'm going to celebrate this because that's going to give me more access to this. It was always just strategic. Like, oh, I put my awards on my website because, that shows people that, my department is doing really, really well. It wasn't for me. It was a strategic way in which I could leverage success for the next success. Like Tom Brady said, the next one. And that's just sort of, and believe me, Ron, I gave it some thought. When you posted that, I kept thinking about it and nothing, I remember when I graduated, I took a bow, shook the dean's hand, and I was done. I was already thinking about, what job offer was I going to take? Because when I graduated, I had like 8 job offers. And I was thinking like, which one am I going to take? And then, being from Detroit, I was trying to figure out how I can take multiple jobs.
I'm sorry. Were you first generation college?
No, both my parents did go to college. Both my parents did go to college. My mom, I think her degree was in anthropology, and then my dad went on to law school, and he went to New York with his other family. Like, we were still poor. He was living large, but we were still poor. It was just, I just always had this thought that I was supposed to do certain things, and my mom, and some of it came from my mom when she would say, you don't get applause for doing what you were supposed to do. So like. If I got all A's, and if I got a B, I was in trouble. If my sister got C's and got an A, we went to dinner. I wasn't allowed any of, for it was like, she was like, you've been blessed, you have talent, you have skill. You're never going to get an award for doing what you should have been doing all along. You never.
Yeah, I wish one of our friends was a psych major, because my 1 semester of psych doesn't equip me to unpack Darren Gray. There's some issues here, man.
Well, I tell you, Ron, I don't think Darren's as far off, at least from me, as he maybe seems from you, because I distinctly remember being brought up with a similar ethic. My father would bring up people like Jim Brown, or particularly somebody like that. Like, and Darren uses Barry Sanders. Like, when he would score the touchdown, he would just drop the ball in the end zone or whatever. There was no fanfare. But then you look at people like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. Those guys didn't walk around saying, I'm the best, I'm the greatest. The only one who really did that kind of thing was Muhammad Ali, right? And for that reason, many people did not like him, because if, he's too braggadocious, he's too whatever, he would celebrate his wins or whatever. But I guess what I'm saying is I come from a similar place as Darren when it comes down to feeling like, well, it's always the next thing that you're after. My wife would even say that kind of stuff, like, you don't spend enough time kind of just kind of celebrating, or just acknowledging what it is that you have done or that you have. But I'll give you, from my point of view, two examples that I think speak to what you're saying, Ron, where like it would have been nice to have the media there, have it be televised or whatever the language was that you used, because it was critical to my life. I thought about it as well, and I realized there were two things that really were instrumental, I think, in me becoming who I am today, for better, for worse. And one was when my sister died, and not just her death, but there was a particular moment. I'm not a crier much. I haven't cried many times in my life from emotion, and I really wasn't thinking emotionally of crying when my sister passed back in 1998. But there was a point where the ministers from my mom's church were all at the house, and they were praying for the family. And the prayer finished, and I didn't necessarily feel a rush of anything. And then one of the ministers just came and hugged me. And for whatever reason, I just broke down. I just broke down and cried, sobbed, just like a nice, fresh, heaving sob, right? And I thought about it afterwards, like, what was I sobbing about? And then I realized that was the moment in my life that I realized that I had so many blessings to be thankful for that I had never really recognized. I had the blessing. People who know me, and maybe those who don't, know that my sister went through probably about 15 years where she was struggling with lupus. And the effect of lupus was that she had kidney failure, and she had to basically go through a regimen of dialysis every day. But even with that, she worked a regular job. She was a volunteer at the church. She did a lot of different things. And if you didn't necessarily know her struggle, you wouldn't necessarily realize everything that she had gone through. Now, I looked at myself and said, gee, Nick, would you have been able to handle that situation with the same amount of grace as your sister did? And even with that, to be able to be a testament to so many people, to show how you can live a life of purpose and of meaning that affects other people, even when you're not trying to, right? Mm-hmm. So I realized that there was that I had been blessed to not have to face that. But at the same time, now a mantle has been passed to me in our family's history. Like, what is going to be the result of her passing as it relates to who I will become to my family and to those who know me, right? And that was a critical moment in my development that I realized snapped me to a different place. So I'll give one other brief example, and that is that I learned something about business in this instance. I was used to work in television pretty much exclusively earlier in my career, before I became kind of more of an entrepreneur and realtor and things like that. I was working for a late night show called Vibe TV, which was produced by Quincy Jones Company and stuff like that. And it was hosted by Sinbad at that moment. And I used to really pride myself on being the best producer that I could be. And part of being a good producer was rehearsing situations to the point that when the cameras rolled, you were so prepared that you would make it look as if it was all spontaneous, right? Mm-hmm. That was the ethic that I had kind of grown up as a producer with. Well, there were people on that show who didn't share that ethic, right? But what they did do was they realized that being close to the talent personally, being close to the talent, in terms of what the talent liked or didn't like, was more important than being great. But I kept pushing to be great. And one day the executive producer invited me into his office and basically said, Nick, we're not going to renew your contract. So thank you very much. We'll see you, maybe down the line. And they let me go. And I realized at that point, something, that being great is important, but it's not as important as reading the room and knowing what the room wants. It's better to be liked than be good. If you can't be both, if you got to be one or the other, it's important to be liked, because those who are liked will get invited back. Now, I'm not saying you don't want to be good in life, but I am saying that there's something to recognize in the room and having that be an important equation. So those were the two things that I will share.
Wow.
That is deep. And one thing, I do thank God every morning. Well, actually, many times a day, for the blessings and the successes. And, on my drive home, I recount my day, and, I thank God for the things that went well and ask for guidance for the things that I didn't do as well as I'd like. So, it's not that I'm not acknowledging it to God about the successes, but, you look behind you, you see, some of my degrees on the wall. Well, when I got my degrees in the mail, I didn't open them. I put them in a box, the biomedical, electrical, and the math, they went in the box. And, I graduated in 88. In 2010, I got my master's degree in education, and I put that in the same box. When I got my doctorate in 2018, my wife said, you are not putting another degree in the box. You must take them out of the box and you need to post them. And I said, why? She said, it's important for people to know about your success, particularly young people of color. And so I was like, okay. And so when I got my last degree in 2021, she made me even update the frame. So I've got a frame here at home and a frame at work, because she said it was important. Like I said, with I essentially got the degree, handed it to the box, and went on to the next one, because it wasn't that I wasn't appreciative. I wasn't thankful. I wore my USC ring until it didn't fit anymore. and I, it was like, I'm USC, fight on, and all that other stuff. But, very similar to you, Nick, when you look at, the folks who were like legends for us growing up, sans Muhammad Ali, they kept their head down and they kept working. And, and I think about Kobe Bryant and that work ethic. There was always that moment of, yeah, but then Kobe would be back at the gym the next day.
Yeah,
the next day after, or that night after the championship, back in there, not talking about that. Same thing with Tom Brady. It was like, all right, when people say, what's your favorite degree? The next one. And he was always focused singularly on that. And so, Ron, when you say that, I just don't think about it.
I know, and honestly, to me, it's troubling, because be it Kobe or Jordan or Magic or whoever, they all understood where they stood in terms of championships and MVPs compared to everyone else. They had their scorecard. Yes, they had an amazing work ethic. We have an amazing work ethic. That's how we got where we are, and we're very blessed. But the question was, what was a pivotal moment in your life? And it's not a brag. As Nick pointed out, it could be just a moment of sadness that just comes out. And I think that when you look at your life and you can't find an area that was pivotal, again, I'm ill-equipped to understand why, because you've done a lot, but there's nothing in your life where you can say, you know what, if I had gone left instead of right, my whole life may have changed if I had made
but that's every success. It's like if I had gone to Michigan instead of going to USC, those were all of pivotal moments for me when, go left or go right. If I had decided that dance was more important than engineering, I've always had those, like, every day there's always that fork in the road that I'm always, staring down. And I choose it, and it just keep rolling, and not even thinking about that moment in time, because it doesn't matter. And I guess it's sort of you know the way in which I relate to young people, and even in terms of how I relate to my successes. It's like, once you go down that path, it's set. I'm not Yoda or anything. It's set, but I don't I don't dwell on when the decision was. None of that stuff. It's and I've had some things that have hit me in the face, and there is one thing, but it wasn't an actual. Now that I think about it, there was one thing that didn't actually happen, but it happened in my mind. I'll share that with you if we have time. All right. So my entire
If you're getting to your authentic self here, please take some time so you can unpack this.
All right. So,
but be brief.
There was something that I did share with my mom once. When I graduated from school, I was telling her that my entire life I've run up against obstacles, just everything, and I would always see the obstacle as a wall, and I would hit the wall and not go through it, and then I would take more steps back, and I'd hit the wall again, and I would go far enough back until I can smash through that wall. And right when I graduated, it was this huge wall that was between me and graduation. And I hit the wall, and it was really, really thick, the thickest wall I had ever had. And I kept walking backwards and walking backwards and walking backwards to give myself enough momentum. But I got so far back from the wall that I saw there was a path around the wall. And then I turned around in my mind's eye and looked back at all the walls that I had smashed through, and each one had a path around. And what I realized in that moment that I was sharing with my mom is that I don't always have to smash through the wall. I need to keep my eyes open to see what is the path around. And the path around that I had found was that I didn't have to go to war with my advisor to get this class to count for both degrees. I just had to have a conversation and show them the syllabus, because the advisor was not a math person. They wouldn't know. If I say, EE 464 is the same as this math class, they would go, no, it's not. Well, they wouldn't know. But if I brought the syllabi from both classes and say, see, look, they're exactly the same, then that person was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So rather than me going and filing complaint, back then I was like, everything's about racism. Instead of doing that and going to the dean and the vice dean and everything, I just had to have a conversation. That was something that didn't actually happen in reality. It was an epiphany that happened of, I don't always have to smash through the wall, because that's what I'd always done. I had gotten so far away from the problem that I saw the path around, and then turning around, I saw that there was always a path around.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that Nick and I were we were vulnerable. You just talking a whole bunch of mess right now. You are proving my friend LA's point when she says men don't show vulnerability, they don't talk about deep subjects. Right. You just use a whole bunch of words, and I try to hear it.
Yeah, Ron said, boy, that word salad sure was tasty.
I thought that was deep. The wall and the path are beautiful.
No, it was.
I'm gonna give you credit, Darren. I'm gonna give you credit. I think you came back strong, man. You started off a little shaky. It took you about 30 minutes, but you finally found something out.
I checked out at 25 minutes, so maybe I listened to the last 5.
The rest of the viewers didn't, So, but yeah, no, that it makes sense, man. I mean, I think we've all got those periods in our life. If we really look back, there's a philosopher who says basically, the life unreflected is not worth living. I'm paraphrasing basically.
Yep. Gotta examine life.
Yeah. So I think we must take opportunities to be present. I think now more than ever, being present to what is happening in our day-to-day life, those small moments as well as big moments, is really the key to excelling into better and higher versions of ourselves as we go forward. If we're just basically plowing ahead without any intention about who it is we're trying to be, then we're probably going to have a hard time, really embracing, the things that we could embrace. So I think those are great points, guys. We're here at the toward the tail end of our time. So Ron, I'm not going to eat up any more of the clock. What's your parting shot for us today?
I would say that I think if we take a look at our lives and examine them, there are so many moments. We have friends. We have a friend in Denver that left Los Angeles. I think he left before me. And his life, I'm sure, is completely different because he made that choice versus staying in Los Angeles. I was scared to death of leaving Los Angeles for greener pastures. I remember looking at that one-way ticket and being afraid. It was the best decision I made in my life, other than getting married, of course. And there's all these pivotal moments that if we think about it, Darren, I would say the fact that you are a grandfather and the decision you made to stay in Los Angeles is a pivotal moment because you could have went another direction and your life would be very different and your relationship with your grandchildren would be very different. I mean, I just go through your life for you and give you pivotal decisions. But anyway,
newsworthy though is I guess what caught me was that, like, when did you wish the cameras would be there? That, I guess that's sort of like
sitting at the dinner at the breakfast room table with your wife and having that conversation about, I really want to go there, but we just got some news, and just kicking it around. I mean, that is a moment where the grandchildren would be like, oh my God, I'm so glad you televised that, because if it wasn't for that moment, I wouldn't have a relationship with you. And now I understand the decisions you had to make and the sacrifices you had to make. For us, we had to leave all you guys in Los Angeles to go someplace where we didn't know a soul. Right. You decided to stay and be present in your grandchildren's life. These are pivotal moments, and that you just need to reflect a little bit more, my friend, on decisions you made.
Well, it's good that he's got you as a friend to remind him of his whole life's resume, right? So you can't let anything happen to you, or else Darren won't know where he's been. He certainly knows where he's going.
Ron will be writing my biopic.
Yeah. So, Ron, though, you had something that you wanted to bring up to take us out on, right?
Yeah, I did. And let me know when you can see my screen.
Okay, I'm going to bring that up. And whoops, cancel. Here we go. There you go.
So last episode, we talked about AI. And Google has released in the past few months this amazing AI notebook called Notebook LM. And basically what you can do, and I'm going to just show you real quickly, I have one called Moving to Europe. What you can do is you can load just hours and hours of YouTube videos, PDFs, websites, and those are called sources. And then you can start asking questions, and it looks at all of the data. This could be like 5, 6, 10 hours, doesn't matter. You can have up to 50 attachments for free. And you can just say, what's the best visa for retirement people in Portugal? And it looks at all the videos, and it's going to come back with an answer in a second. And it's going to tell us that the D7 visa is the one that's the best for retirement folks. You can still get a job and work, but if you're retired and you have a certain income level, which is basically the minimum wage in Portugal or France or wherever, you want to apply for the D7. And you see how fast it went through all of the videos and provided the information. But that's not what's really cool. What's really cool is over here, there's an audio button.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are diving into all things moving to Portugal from the USA.
Sounds exciting.
It is. You've sent me so much good stuff to look at, YouTube videos, articles, even some PDFs. I think we've got a good picture of what we need to cover to help anyone considering this.
Those aren't real people. That's AI. So you can literally have it summarize. This one's, I think, 20 minutes long. You can listen to it if you're an auditory learner. You can listen to it in your car, on your computer, on your phone. You can ask it questions, and if we had time, I would show you how you could break into the audio and say, hey, I have 3 kids. Tell me, is it a good place for children? And it would say, oh, someone's asking us a question. And it would go through all of the videos and answer that prompt. So it's called Notebook LM. It's from Google. It's AI, which scares at least one of us. And it's comfort.
Well, let me, before you close out, there's an expression we say in the computer science world: garbage in, garbage out, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to curate all that information ahead of time to feed it into there. Mm-hmm. My contention with AI is that you have those skills. A lot of people who are using AI don't have those skills. They'll do a Google search of reasons to go to, to retire, and then they'll feed in that without being able to curate or vet the sources. If you fed those, bad sources into that same notebook, you're going to get a report. So, and your Google searches are based on the algorithm and its understanding of you. So you already have biases built in to your data sources that you're putting into an AI that's then give you an interpretation of those data sources. Because you've traveled about and you understand what a Visa D7 is, you have a bit of discernment. I couldn't do that same thing with that because I don't have context for that. And what I am concerned about AI is people who don't know how to critically think or vet sources will then get these answers that sound good, sound reasonable, but are bogus. So that's another point that I would have a problem with AI, is that you have to have those critical thinking skills up front to be able to use AI. And if you don't have them, you're subject to whatever that AI decides.
I think to Ron's point, though, Darren, and to your point too, Ron already tracked a bunch of sources that he felt related to his interest. Mm-hmm. And what he's looking for is an option that can distill it, right? Yep. I've got all these disparate sources, and I want something to distill all that information. And absent some hallucination from AI or something like that, he's gotten something that distills all that. And if he wanted to, he could take some sources and say, here are bad things about going to Europe. Absolutely. Right? And you can put all that together and distill it for pros and cons. Mm-hmm. And I think most people have that ability.
Yeah, he has that skill. And my concern with AI is that some people won't have that skill and they will still use the AI, and they're going to get that biased information back, that echo chamber. That's one of my problems with AI.
But how is that different from talking to your neighbor that has no knowledge of travel, and you ask them and you rely on their opinion?
Well, you probably would not, because AI has this mystique about it, you probably would not give the same value to your neighbor who, can't take their trash out on Wednesday as you would the AI, because AI and computers are these magical black boxes that people have begun to rely on as experts. When people are getting news from TikTok and they're, spouting it as real, or the fake, the AI generated social media algorithms, people have put a lot of credence and weight into the AI that it doesn't necessarily mean it deserved it. And so you have to have that critical eye before you can even utilize a tool effectively. And I think that's where my concern is with AI.
All right.
Well, Ron, I know you want to get on, and we're not going to relitigate the AI discussion.
Nope. Get off my lawn.
I think there are certainly cautionary lights. There are green lights and there are red lights, as there are with everything. And I think in our day and age, we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then we suddenly become comfortable with what we were uncomfortable with. And then there's something else that comes along. And so, Darren, your points, I think, are well-founded. There certainly are people who at this stage of the game can't use it as effectively as others. Okay. But the day is going to come when people are going to have to catch up, or they are not, because I don't think that we're going back. So whatever the next frontier is, we have to be ready for it. And so if you guys out there have thoughts about anything that we discussed, and particularly the upfront topic that Ron addressed about that moment in your life that, you know, was worthy of cameras capturing because it was like a critical moment in your life, we'd love to hear what yours are. We'd love to hear your thoughts about anything that we discussed about our takeaways from what happened in our own experiences, as well as this ongoing debate about AI and so forth. So it's always good to talk with you guys, man. I always learn something. I hope you guys felt like you got something out of this too. Darren, you got some psychological work to do.
Maybe I'll ask an AI to help me.
Get in touch with your feelings, you know, and you know, maybe by the time we come back again, you know, you'll have some new revelations for us. But, just kidding with you, man. It's always a good time. So again, guys, like and subscribe. We hope you'll leave a comment, share it with other people who you think might want to engage in the conversation. Ron, Darren, you guys are two of the smartest guys I know. Always a pleasure. So we'll see you guys on the next one. You guys, we've got issues. You don't have to. We'll see you next time.